In the quiet glow of a late autumn afternoon, the small suburban street hummed with the gentle rumble of motorcycle engines as a group of bikers gathered near the curb, their leather vests gleaming under the soft sunlight. Young boy named Tommy stood there, his gray hoodie slightly oversized, his brown eyes wide with a mix of fear and hope. The man kneeling before him was big, with a thick beard and tattoos snaking up his arms. His name was James, and his voice carried the weight of years. Spent on the open road, the other bikers stood close, their faces weathered yet kind, their vests marked with the proud emblem of the Hells Angels, a name that once might have stirred unease but now seemed to hold a different promise. Tommy shuffled, his feet the cool pavement beneath him, a reminder of the ordinary day that had turned so suddenly strange. He leaned in close, his voice barely a whisper as he spoke. "They took my sister." The words hung in the air like a fragile thread, and James didn't hesitate. He rose to his feet, his movement slow but deliberate, signaling to the others with a nod that needed no words. The group sprang into action, their boots thudding softly against the ground as they moved toward their bikes. The sound of engines starting filled the street, a steady rhythm that spoke of purpose rather than chaos. James turned back to Tommy, his hand resting gently on the boy's shoulder. "You stay here, little man. We'll bring her back." The promise was simple, but it carried the strength of a man who had seen hardship and learned to trust in the goodness that still lingered in the world. Tommy nodded, his small frame relaxing just a bit as the bikers roared off down the road, their tail lights fading into the distance back in those days of the 1960s, when James was a young man himself. He remembered the long summer nights spent riding with his own crew, the open highways stretching out like ribbons of freedom, the smell of gasoline and wildflowers blending in the warm air. It was a time of rebellion, sure, but also a time of community where a handshake meant something, and a promise was kept. Now in his 50s, with gray threading through his beard, those memories softened into wisdom. He knew the world had changed, but the heart of it stayed the same. People needed each other. The bikers rode through the winding streets, their headlights cutting through the gathering dusk. They knew the neighborhood well, having grown up in towns much like this one where every corner held a story. Old diners with flickering neon signs and gas stations where men swapped tales over cups of coffee. It was a world that felt distant, now replaced by strip malls and fast-paced lives. But the bikers carried its spirit in their bones. They moved with a quiet determination, their eyes scanning for any sign of the trouble Tommy had hinted at. In the back of James's mind, he thought of his own sister Mary, who had been his shadow as a kid. She'd follow him everywhere, her pigtails bouncing as she giggled at his silly jokes one summer when she was just 8. She'd wandered off during a family picnic, and the panic that gripped him then was a feeling he'd never forget. They found her, safe near the creek, her shoes muddy but her smile bright. That memory fueled his resolve now as he led his crew through the night. The trail led them to an old warehouse on the edge of town, its windows dark and its walls weathered by time. The bikers parked their bikes in a neat row, their movements practiced and silent. James motioned for the others to spread out, his voice low but firm. "Let's do this right." Among them was a man named Robert, tall and lean with a gentle smile that hid a lifetime of hard work. He'd been a mechanic back in the day, his hands always stained with grease, but his heart full of patience. Another was Paul, a quiet soul who'd once been a teacher before life took him down a different path. Together, they moved like a family, bound not just by the road but by a shared understanding of what it meant to care. Inside the warehouse, they found her, a girl named Emily, no more than 10, her dark hair tangled and her cheeks streaked with tears. She sat on an old crate, her small hands clasped together as if holding on to hope. 2 figures loomed nearby, rough-looking men who froze at the sight of the bikers filling the doorway. James stepped forward, his presence commanding yet calm. "We're taking her home." His words were steady, a declaration rather than a threat. The men exchanged glances, then backed away, their bravado crumbling under the weight of the bikers' quiet strength. Emily looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief. But when James held out his hand, she took it, her small fingers trembling in his calloused grip. The other bikers moved efficiently, checking the space to ensure no one else was in danger. Robert knelt beside her, offering a kind smile. "You're safe now, kid," his voice carried the warmth of a father who'd raised 3 children of his own. Paul gathered a blanket from one of the bikes, wrapping it around her shoulders as they led her outside. The ride back was slower, the night air cool against their skin. Emily sat behind James, her arms wrapped around his waist, her head resting against his back. The other bikers followed, their headlights forming a protective circle around her. James could feel her breathing steady as the miles passed, and in that moment, he thought of the years ahead for this girl. The challenges she'd face and the joys she'd find. It reminded him of his own life, the mistakes he'd made, and the lessons that had shaped him into the man he was now. When they reached Tommy's street, the boy was still there, waiting, his small figure, a silhouette against the porch light. The bikes rolled to a stop and Emily slid off, running to her brother, their reunion, a quiet embrace that needed no words. James watched with a smile, tugging at his beard, the sight stirring memories of family gatherings long ago, the smell of his mother's apple pie filling the house, the sound of laughter echoing through the yard. Those were the days that grounded him now, teaching him that love was the thread that held everything together. Tommy looked up at James, his voice soft. "Thank you." James knelt again, his knees creaking with age. "No need for that, son. We look out for each other." The other bikers nodded their agreement, their faces softened by the night's work. Robert clapped a hand on James's shoulder. "Good job," old friend Paul added with a chuckle. "We're still the best crew around." The laughter that followed was gentle, a sound that carried the weight of years and the lightness of shared purpose. As the bikers prepared to leave, Emily tugged at James's sleeve, her eyes bright with gratitude. She handed him a small drawing, a picture of a motorcycle with a smiling family beside it. James took it carefully, tucking it into his vest, his throat tightening with emotion. "You keep being brave, kid," he said, his voice thick with warmth. Then with a final wave, the bikers rode off, their taillights disappearing into the night. Back at home that evening, James sat by his window, the drawing resting on the table beside him. The room was quiet, save for the tick of an old clock, a gift from his father. Decades ago, he thought of Tommy and Emily, their young faces full of resilience, and he felt a deep peace. Life had taught him that kindness wasn't loud or showy. It was the steady hand, the open heart, the willingness to act when it mattered. Those lessons had carried him through wars, lost loves, and the quiet ache of growing older. Outside, the stars began to peek through the clouds, a sight that reminded him of campouts with his friends in the 1970s. The crackle of a campfire, the stories swapped under the vast sky. Those nights had been simple, but they'd built something lasting, a sense of belonging that he carried still now as he looked out. He knew the world was different, faster, and sometimes colder, but the essence remained the same. People needed connection. They needed to know someone was there. The next morning, James woke to the sound of birds outside his window. He brewed a cup of coffee, the rich aroma filling the kitchen, just as it had when he was a young man starting his day. He thought of the kids and the promise he'd made. It wasn't just about that night. It was about the legacy he wanted to leave, a legacy of care, a legacy of standing up when it counted. He picked up the phone, dialing Robert's number with a smile. "Let's check on them today." Later that afternoon, the bikers returned to Tommy's house, their bikes parked neatly once more. Tommy and Emily ran out to greet them, their smiles bright against the autumn leaves. James handed Emily a small helmet, a gift from the crew, her eyes lighting up with joy. Robert brought a bag of cookies, his wife's recipe a nod to the homemade treats of their youth. Paul sat with Tommy, showing him how to draw a motorcycle. The two bent over a sketch pad, lost in the moment. The afternoon passed in a gentle rhythm, the sound of laughter mixing with the rustle of leaves. James watched it all, his heart full. He thought of his own childhood, the games he'd played, the friends he'd lost touch with. Those memories were bittersweet, but they reminded him of the importance of now, of being present. For these kids who needed a guiding hand, the bikers stayed until the sun dipped low, their departure marked by warm goodbyes and promises to return. As they rode away, James felt the cool air on his face, the road stretching out before him. He knew life would bring more challenges for Tommy and Emily, but he also knew they wouldn't face them alone. The community he'd built with his crew was a gift, a thread of kindness that wove through the years, and as the night settled around him, he held on to that thought, letting it carry him home. In the days that followed, the story of that night spread quietly through the town. Old folks sitting on porches nodded with approval, remembering their own acts of kindness from decades past. James and his crew became a symbol not of toughness,